It is
It is
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Ahem.
For those of you on the YouTube channel, thank you for subscribing, one. And number two, your reward is my weird, my hair is at this length where I don't even know what part of my hair that is. That's just like, it's just
Bangs?
the tiny, no, aren't bangs in the front? Aren't bangs
Well, you can have
fringes?
long side bangs.
You think this side of me is long side bangs
I
coming
think
to
it could
haunt
be
me
a
out
long
the
side
side of
bang.
my ear face?
Yeah,
No.
I think it could
Well,
be.
what do you think, Team BB?
Better than a
Right,
rat tail.
right. Yeah, this is better than the rat tail, which yes, we've seen. For those loyal fans, you remember that good old day, the rat tail day. That's we don't speak of that day anymore. So okay, hello. What?
But we're going to talk about the year.
Okay,
We're going to talk about the year in review. So that's a thing.
that's a thing that's happening.
Yeah.
Good, good. I feel like I've been speaking all day. You talk.
I think you want me to talk because, like, I don't know if this is accurate, but I felt a little hesitation when I was like, "No, we're going to talk about our personal year in review," and you were like, "I felt like
No.
a moment pause too long from your end." Like,
I'm
like
still
you
processing.
not stoked on that.
Uh, I mean this, yeah, because I don't want to just air grievances. Um, no, there were some amazing things that happened in 2020. I feel like anyone who says that, they're like, oh, amazing things happened in 2021. But all I can think right now is like COVID. I'm exhausted. Like I'm so grateful that people are happy and healthy, that I know for the most part. And, but I'm going to just put this out there. I'm even sick of talking about being grateful that there are people that I'm just sick of. I'm just tired. I'm tired of the gyms being closed. I'm tired
Oh,
of the arguments online. I'm tired of like
oh.
friends falling off and having these really difficult I'm just tired of it. I'm tired.
Like the vaccination conversations. I was just
Oh,
like, they kept splurting up. That's not even a word, but I'm going to use it. They're
yeah.
splurting up, and I was just dodging them, like left,
Oh.
left, right, just dodging them. I was like, nah, I'm not going to do that. I'm not
I
here.
wanted, yeah, I
You do
wanted to be able
you.
to be like, what can I learn from this? And then at the end of the year, I was just like, I just want to stare at a wall and do nothing and have no one there, so I can just not have to make a decision or
Right.
choice
Like
about
science
anything.
says that this thing is gonna morph because people didn't get vaccines. But you know what? You do you.
I'm
It's
just, yeah,
fine.
I'm just,
Smoke in
yeah,
my face.
I
I
have
like it.
nothing. I have nothing.
I want to
I
die
have,
early. Thank
I,
you.
oh, I don't, God, don't get started into this conversation. We're not having, we're not
No,
talking about, and I
I don't
think
even care.
we've intentionally, now, you know what, when it really comes down to it, I'm not a scientist, nor am I a doctor, nor do I work in healthcare. And therefore, that it is not part of this that is not part of this conversation. And yet I did have a conversation with someone recently where I was like, this is why I'm not being public about opinions one way or
Yeah.
another about this, because I care right now that the creative industries are really, really struggling. I care about all of you out there that are listening to this show that are like, how do I generate income? How do I have a side hustle? How do I do these things? Because if I engage in a conversation about something that I ultimately have no deep experience or expertise in, and I am wasting time that I could have fixed five people's resumes in that same time.
I understand that. I am happy to be public about my opinion on it. However, I am not in a position where I'm trying to change other people's minds about things.
Yeah, you're very
If they
good like
want to
that.
know my opinion on it, I will happily share it. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm not championing the cause on social and things like that. Like, that's not my. I don't have the bandwidth for it, quite frankly.
Mm-hmm.
but I will be very happy to share with people research if they're looking for it. I do dive into research, so that is something that I'm very happy to do.
Yes. You love that. You love your data.
I do love my data, and I do love logical arguments. So I'm I'm here to have at her if people want to play. To me, that is my fun house. So I'm happy to do it, but no, I'm not here to tell anyone what to do. I do tease, but I will not tell people what to do. But year in review. So here's what I'm curious about. How did your life change over this year? So like I haven't been living here. The one time I did come here, I'm trying to think. I think
Summer.
most things were open.
Yeah,
Um,
it was a good spot.
it was
We
like I
had to
came at a
still
good
exercise
point.
caution, but it was a good
Yeah.
spot.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
relatively.
what did it look like for you here? Like what was going on? How did it change? Because you work from home normally, but you're very
Yeah.
social normally. And a lot of like, especially with music, you do gigs and you play music for crowds of people, which didn't exist as much this year. So I'm really curious, like what did it look like for you and how did you have to pivot?
Um, Great question. I think what happened for me was I, like many people, and Tam has a great episode with us on
Mm-hmm.
this about that kind of stages of, disaster where you go into savior mode and then you go into kind of like comfort mode and you go. I
Mm-hmm.
went through those sorts of phases. At the very beginning, I'm very lucky that my loved ones and the closest people to me are extraordinarily supportive people who also know me really well. So when in the last year, I mean, last year we were pretty well into it
It's like
by
2 years now.
it's two
I'm saying
years, yeah.
last
20
year, but this is like the second year of the
yeah.
pandemic.
So 2021, I had been self-taping from home for a year. The wall you see behind me, I painted as soon as I moved in, um, thinking if I have to send in self-tapes, and then very quickly it was like everything went to self-tape. It caused me to really address the last year really caused me to address my desire to have um, self-empowered income centers
Mm-hmm.
and plural. And you and I spoke about that a lot, and that was something that really drove bombshell brunches, in my opinion, in some of the guests that I wanted to speak with, and you as well. But I think for me, it was pretty intentional, where I was like, I want to not answer to other people
Mm-hmm.
the same way. And I think that navigating the entrepreneurial journey as someone who has a lot of imposter syndrome was a really big personal kind of move for me. And another huge thing last year was reclaiming language. I've been learning Cantonese now at a snail's, like a glacial rate.
Doesn't sound like that. I watch
Oh,
stories. You sound so good.
oh, you don't speak Cantonese.
I
That's
don't.
why. Yes.
I'm like, that sounds so legit.
Yeah, it's really.
I can't argue with you on that. There's nothing more I can say.
Well, yeah, but so last year personally, I really, there was a huge, huge increase. There was a 700% increase in Asian hate crimes,
Mm.
and I was exposed in various ways um, to my own kind of hesitance to stand up for an identity that I feel, but didn't fully feel allowed into in some ways because I'm mixed race. And so I had to deal with a lot of that internal struggle and identity for people
Mm.
who are kind of, I mean, for me, as someone who is, I'm not even biracial, I'm like Chinese, Nepalese, and then English, Polish. For someone who's got such culture kind of a mix, it was a difficult time because the reality was I looked at the videos of these things that are happening, and that is my family. Those are the people that I grew up with. That is the same culture. That is, my surroundings, and coming from Hong Kong. And so I had been saying I wanted to learn Cantonese for a really long time, and I'd been feeling really left out of that part of my culture. And eventually I just moved past and went, you know what? I'm not going to let other people's perception of whether I'm allowed in to dictate how I feel about myself. Um, and so I got private lessons and I still have them, and Miss Hong is amazing. Um, and so personally, I really held myself more accountable to be uh, to take responsibility and leadership, and to let go of the things that didn't serve me. I left the boards that I was on, and I started shifting more towards bombshell brunches as an opportunity for us to build the community that we had envisioned it. And with that came a lot of fear, and you walked me through a lot of that, but building that relationship with you was a really big part of last year for me.
And I just want to say, for those of you who don't know Kristina, she was on like 1,000,000,002 boards. I don't even know, like, I didn't even know there were that
No.
many boards. But it took so much time and so much energy, and you still do so many things that are complementary to your values and to what you're working on, but also are taking a lot of separate time and energy to drive all of those forward. So it was a really huge step when I saw Kristina step down from some of those boards. I was cheering her on so hard because
It
I
was
could
hard for me.
see it was really
You had
hard.
to walk me through it. I was like, they need me. It's not true. They did not need, I mean, I'm sure I was helpful. But yeah, but thank you. And I think it was 2021 was a redirection of energy, and a real,
Yes.
yeah, a real focus. And yeah, I learned a lot of that through bombshells.
And it's so important. It's like, we can do so many of these things, but then to make the most impact, you have to figure out what moves you the furthest in what you desire. So for you, you did that. You distilled that down and you said, okay, what is what I actually care about? How, what do I want my life to look like? What is going to allow me to move in the right direction for those things that I care about? Because every board that you were on, you care about those things, but maybe it's not the best thing in this time of your life in terms of like putting your
Yeah.
energy into that versus something else to move that forward.
It's an interesting point. I left the board ultimately because I realized that I did what I went there to do.
Mm.
And I think a lot of people stay. I mean, I can only speak for myself, actually. I stayed because I wasn't clear about whether that I had achieved that. And it was so normal that I normalized feeling like I needed to be there. And what I realized with what you and I do, and how we've been navigating bombshells, is I started looking at why I was there. And when that shifted from, I think that I am a voice that I feel good being on here, when it shifted from that to I feel like a lot of other people will benefit, that shift in my mentality was like, oh, I don't need to be here. There are other people around here that can speak to the same things that I care about. I have faith in that board. And I left not feeling like I'd left anyone in the lurch, but also not feeling like I was there for myself, because I don't want to be on that board to be there for myself. That wasn't useful.
Like as a pat on the back, you mean, kind of a thing.
Yeah, external validation is what
Yeah.
I mean. I recognize that I love compliments and I love external validation. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that as long as I keep it in check.
Yeah, and as long as you're not burning out to
Yeah,
get that,
to
right?
get
Like you
it.
don't want it to be
Yeah.
working against your health because you want
Exactly.
the validation. The validation is fine. That's why we have grades. And
What about how
winnings.
about you? What was your What were your big pivots? What were your
My
big
big
transformations?
ahas. Oh my gosh, this year was like just the year of pivots and ahas. So in 2021, was it even 2021? No, it was 2020 still when I went to Amsterdam.
Yeah.
And then I spent 7 months there, and pretty much almost the entire time was in like hardcore lockdown. So I was supposed to be attending classes in every semester, every block. They call them blocks. Blocks are within semesters. Anyways, each time they would be like, oh, we're going to let you know if we're going to be back in person or not. And then it wouldn't be. And for me, it was
Ugh.
really important to be there because it's a time zone thing. So I would have been doing classes at like 3 in the morning here, which I know myself, it just wouldn't have worked. So it
Right.
was good in that sense. I also think that I'm really blessed because I truly think I got to see the city in a way that no one will ever see it that way again. Post pandemic, I think it's just you're not going to see it like that. It's such a busy city. And I got to see it empty, which is absolutely incredible. Like I would go on walks some days and I'd walk for like 2, 3 hours and I would see maybe a handful of people. 2, 3 hours
In
in Amsterdam?
Amsterdam. No
Like
way.
it's just
No way.
insane. It's insane. And I saw it through like one of the biggest snowstorms that they've had in 12 years. The dikes froze over. Sorry, the canals froze over. Here we have dikes. There are canals.
Hmm.
For the first time in so many years, which I've wanted to see since I was a little kid because I remembered all of the master paintings with people ice skating and everything. And so I got to do that, and that was amazing. But um, I was very, very goal oriented when I left for Amsterdam. Like everything
Mm.
came down to this was the goal I'd had for many years. Um, I had gotten into the program. I was going to make it happen come hell or high water.
Hmm.
Very goal oriented, and everything else, like all of the softer parts of life, my relationships and things like that kind of suffered for it.
Mm.
So those 7 months definitely taught me that I need more than just hard goals. And it made me
Good.
really realize how important my relationships are. Because I
Mm.
am someone who can get hyper focused on stuff. And
Right.
that's what I was doing. I just went in full hyper focus mode. I did everything that I should have done. I did the walks, I did the movement, I did the water, I did the workouts, I did like I was so zenned out. I was so dialed in. I was so like everything was correct. But I had nobody there to share it with, which was difficult. Um, so that was a huge learning, and for the rest of 2021, I've really focused on trying to spend more time with the people that I love, spend more time with the people that I want to be around and that inspire me. And it's also part of the reason why I decided to come back to Canada when Amsterdam shut back down and I found out my classes were going to be online. I asked them if they could make my classes later in the day so that I could come back to Canada because I
Mm.
realized I really needed to spend time with my people. It'd been so many months since I'd seen everyone. And had I stayed there, it would have been a lot more months. So that was a huge pivot for me to all of a sudden not and I still I'm going to be honest, I still struggle with it
Mm.
because it's things like I know starting class at 6 in the morning is not optimal. Staying at my mom's with a household of people and
And
animals
animals.
everywhere is not optimal.
Everywhere.
Everywhere. It's not optimal for my goal of school. It does put
Mm.
me at a disadvantage. It's not a massive one, but it handicaps me a bit. And I find that very, very difficult because
Mm.
I'm very goal oriented and so I do have to remind myself about those softer sides and I do have to kind of like put everything down and turn my phone off and spend time with people because otherwise what
Mm.
I'll do is I'll just stress about it. I'm not in the optimal place. I'm going to stress about it because I'm not performing at the,
Yeah.
level that I feel I should be. Um so that's been really big, and giving myself that space to turn everything off and spend time with people and be really focused about it. That's been a huge thing. Um I traveled so much. There were so many missed flights and pandemic changes and all of these things. Even like just now, like I was supposed to go back to Amsterdam. Now I'm here because everything got shut down. But I think what it's really made me realize is a lot of times we freak out about nothing.
Mm.
And that's something that my fiance is really, really good about. Like he is so level-headed. Doesn't matter what's happening in the world. Like he's just I'm like, how can you not freak out about these things? There's this and there's this and what about money and that and that? And he's like, yeah, it's stressful. It's gonna be fun. I'm like, what? Um, and so I've really like I wouldn't say I necessarily learned that from him, but the pandemic really showed me that that
Mm.
was necessary to take on. And so that has been huge. Like it just people were freaking out. They're like, "What are you going to do?" Like Omicron came in and now Omicron,
Um,
Omicron, Omicron.
I mean,
I think
I
it's
feel like
Omicron. There's no
it is
N.
Omicron, but I like that you made it Omnicron.
No, you know what? In South Africa, everyone kept calling it Omicron. I was like, I think it's Omicron, but now I'm like switching it all up. So, anyways, it's like a transformer.
I was gonna say, as long as they don't
Transformer.
call the next one Megatron, I'll be happy.
On it. Please do it.
Megatron is my hero.
At least we'll have some chuckles about it.
Yeah. What does Donna call pandemic?
Pandemic. Yeah. So, like everyone's freaking out and they're like, "What if you can't get back to Canada?" I'm like, "I will." Or to Amsterdam, I'm like, "I will. It's gonna be
Or I
fun."
won't.
Oh, and then I'm gonna find a cute little place to rent here. Like it's fine. It's all
You know,
good.
I love that piece of 2021. I do actually really, for me, and I think for you as well, is we found comfort uh, in in the things that we knew, not the things we wanted to control.
Letting go of control was huge.
We did. I think both of us really did that because we had a lot of like with bombshells. We were like, well, how are we going to deal with this? How are we going to deal with this thing? And, both of us at various times in different ways took a step back and went, we have to figure this out.
Yes.
Right. But at the same time, I think one massive epiphany that I loved, and I said it to you the other day when we were talking, I was like, we're our own bosses.
Yeah.
Like I was walking with Betty yesterday from being a butter body, and we went for our regular. We go for a little outside walk, and just catch up. And I love that Betty is like, "What's your meltdown?" and we get to like ventilate, as Shay Emery would say. But we were talking and she was like, yeah, we have these moments where like when you're an entrepreneur, especially if you're still kind of juggling a number of different enterprises, whatever they are, you have to take a moment and go, wait, we're our own bosses. We
Yeah.
can choose not to do this thing. There's not an invisible gun. I had been putting this invisible gun to my head, and I have that habit because I'm so used to being like, I can't fail. And then when I take a step back, I turn around and go, nobody's watching me. No one's watching.
Okay, that is such a huge piece. And I want to add to that because this year I did something that any other year I would never, ever, ever, ever in a million years have done. I extended my course. So by going to South Africa for those 2 months and not being in classes, I ended up extending my thesis portion basically a whole semester.
Okay.
And never in a million years would I have done that. And this year I was like, you know what? I need this. I'm burnt out. I need the break. I would have tried to just push through. Probably would have passed, but probably barely because I would have been so stressed had I just like continued through. Or I might have had a breakdown. I don't know. But I knew enough to know that I was able to finish the block I was in. And I knew enough to know that I wasn't going to look good if I kept running.
Right.
So I took the 2 months off. I went to South Africa. I worked on Bombshells. I worked on my thesis slowly, in my own time outside of courses. I pushed my course those couple months, and I took the time that I needed, which I literally would never have done. And it was a huge, huge issue with my ego. I fought it. So I was kind of depressed when I got there because I was like, I literally felt like a bit of a failure. Like, who needs to take a break? It was like,
Okay.
you know?
This is the thing that I think a lot of people, if you're listening and watching and you're kind of like, oh yeah, I've had that moment. I had that moment last year. I really want to, I wish I was a scientist in this particular moment, but there is science that tells you that those neural pathways that you build and those behaviors that you create and those habits that you form, when you veer off of that path, it feels viscerally like you're a bad person sometimes. Yeah. Your body responds and goes, that's not the path of least resistance. And I think that's one of the big things that I do want to talk about in the year ahead is our propensity for addiction, the way that our minds work, so that when you see that coming, you can be like, you know, we've talked about it before. My habits in the day, I have to break them so that they don't become so solid that if I don't do them, I feel guilty. And if I, leave a board.
And check your ego. Because for me, it was
not
for
ego.
Sure. No, for me, it was for sure.
I don't think
100% it was ego.
See, I don't know. I don't think
I
it's
think for
always
you,
ego.
with your habits, I understand how it's not ego. Or it could not be ego. But for me, with mine, it was 100%. It was nothing about addiction. It was 100% down to, in my head, success looks like this.
Right, but that's still a neural pathway. That's still a way of you thinking and being. You're like, I behave this way, and this is what I do. And when you were like, I'm not going to do this, that's what I'm saying. And it might be ego. That might be semantics about like where that shows up.
For me, it was about like winning. Like, to me,
right, which is a habit. That's who
it
you
wasn't
are.
a habit. But it wasn't a habit. Like, I'll be very clear about this. It was not a habit. It was a mindset. So, and the difference is, habits are system one processing. You don't think about them. Mm-hmm. This is very conscious, very, very conscious. And if anything, it would wrap me up into like, so for example, like I have never in my life called in sick if I wasn't like deathly ill. And most of those times I would work at home because to me it was like weak to not go to work.
I've got to find this article. I have to find this because there's an article where it talks about your habits forming your behavior and your behavior forming your personality.
Yes, but this was more values based. So this is not really, this isn't habitual. This is conscious, like my values. My values was I was a hard worker. My values is you don't give up. My values is no matter what life puts in front of you, you keep going and you trudge through. It's conscious. It's not habitual. It's conscious. It's what I deem as winning is when I get up and I do that work no matter what, whether I wanted to or not. That's a win. That's like a, you know, so that's really comes down to my values. The problem was my values were not necessarily working well for my health and my well-being and my mental health. Okay. So I needed to check that and say, okay, is that really winning? If you are driving yourself into the ground, are you winning? Like, is that actually what you think a winner looks like?
Right.
You know, like, do they have bags down to here? Do they cry? Like, in a bad way, not like a healthy way, but like, you know, it's not healthy. So I had to really check my values and be like, you know, where did these come from? Okay, it comes from people saying you don't bring baggage to work. And that's something you and I have worked on a lot with Bombshells. Like, I would not tell Kristina what was going on in my life. And she's like, what's going on? And then it took me a lot. Like, I would like slowly let out the air of the blue.
A few drunken brunches. Yeah.
Yeah, we did. Oh, yeah, I had to have drinks to be able to like open up and tell you. Yeah. Now I feel really good about it. Like, I was so proud of myself the other day when I told Christina, I sent her a voice note and I was like, we have 4 recordings this month and it's too much. Like I can't actually handle it. And that was a huge step for me. Like normally I would have felt weak by saying that. Like that would have been like,
Right.
I would have been ashamed of myself. Now I'm like, no, this is me saying that I need this for my health. And that's actually empowering. So that was a huge mind shift, like a huge shift, because now
That's a
my
big
values
win.
have changed. Yeah.
I think it's also, that's where we talk a lot about the trust foundation, right? Of
Yeah.
knowing that you can say that when you know that another person is going to have the same trust and faith in you as you do in them holding that information, right? And I
Like
think
100%.
and I think that's what a big thing is about building teams. Like in 2021, I think one of our biggest wins was building this exceptional team of people,
Yeah.
and creating enough space for them to understand that we're learning. Like we're learning all the way through this, and having that capacity to do all the things we want to do is not always there. But
Yeah,
communication was so important, right?
it's so important. I hope that our team um continues and listens to this and continues to feel safe to let us know when things are going awry, because I'm the first one to understand how it doesn't feel safe to do that. I'm the
Oh,
first one to hide things, but
yeah.
I've
But we
really
also
worked
have
on
to
that.
keep doing that, right? Like, and this is where
We,
you and I
yeah,
have these conversations behind the scenes, and we're like,
that's
how
true.
how do we empower people
Yeah.
more? And also, you know, it's hard. It's hard for someone who's on a team to be like, hey, I'm not happy. That's not a normal response in a lot of people's eyes, right? They're like, I don't want to say
Yeah.
that because you must be going through things, or assumptions cause us to stop before we
Or that they're going to
present.
get in trouble. Or that, like,
Yeah,
like
I
I
don't think
think,
our team worries about getting in trouble. I think it's just, I think our team's really empathetic. People are like, yeah, we can see that they're busy. So I'm not gonna, like, when someone calls you and they're like, hey, I know you're really busy right now,
yeah.
but almost every phone call I got in 2021 started with that. And that reminded me that I'm not making enough space for people to feel safe enough to bring up real problems. Because people would call me and go,
Mm.
I know you're really busy. It's just this. And I'm like, oh, you need to jump over 2 hoops before you could even pluck up the courage to talk to me, because you are exercising empathy towards how I'm behaving and presenting publicly. And so my responsibility and accountability is to be like, oh, I need to be less busy. I need to optimize and be more productive.
Oh, that's really interesting. And I have so much empathy, like even so recently one of our amazing team members, I don't know if she would want us to shout her out, so maybe I won't, but she's incredible. Anyways,
Mm,
she is going off to bigger things and on to her dream job, and it's amazing, and she's in school and she's doing all this stuff, and so she let us know that she's leaving the podcast. And for Christina and I, sometimes it can be so easy to assume that people know what's in your head. We're like, both of us, that
mm.
is our dream for our team. Our dream for our team is that they win in life. So when they tell us, hey, I've got this other thing going on and I have this opportunity and I'm going to be doing this thing and I can't do bombshells anymore, we're celebrating. Like, we want to pop a
Mm.
champagne bottle with you. And it was so cute 'cause she was like, oh, I was so nervous to let you guys know. And I think a lot of times people feel like they're letting you down when they let you in on the fact that they
Yeah.
have less capacity, maybe not no capacity, but less capacity than they would normally.
Yeah, and that's happened multiple times with multiple team members that we've
Yes.
had. And
And I've done
that's
it with bosses.
yeah, and I think that's part of one of the big things that we're looking to disrupt, right?
Yes.
Like when we challenge the status quo, for a lot of you watching and listening, you don't see the rest of the iceberg. That
Yeah.
is us kind of challenging, okay, how do we provide value to our team members? How do we provide value to the audience? How do we keep people engaged? How do we keep promoting our guests and support them personally or otherwise, or in their businesses? But I think that's it's a really huge piece that going into 2022 is really important, is figuring out with if wherever you are, whatever teams you're running, ways to create a structure where they can tell you as they're growing, not tell you when they're going.
Yeah, it's like Brene Brown says, brave conversations,
Yeah.
normalizing brave conversations.
And I think,
And
but that requires a very two-sided thing, right? So
100%.
I think a lot of employers traditionally, they don't take that responsibility. So you have these people who are raised, including myself, raised to wait until I have found another job before I leave.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I do that, I'm only doing that because I'm not getting what I want, but I'm expecting for the employer to read my mind. And especially with smaller businesses and creative industries where you might have one boss, you're used to a corporate. If you're used to a corporate structure where it's like, here's the training program and here's the trajectory, and you have this whole department, the HR department, that is built to help you get the metrics, go through the system, do it in a frameworky way.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have that, you do as much as you can, and then you kind of like burn out and go,
Or
right?
even like, let's not even talk about just leaving, but also how you work within the system. So I
Mm.
love Brene Brown. I nerd out on her all the time. Brene Brown, if you ever want to be on the podcast, let us know because I would try and go to heaven. But also, um, what she talks about is having those brave conversations and basically facilitating a space where people can have brave conversations with you, whether it be, I pitched this idea and I felt like nobody listened. No one leading a team ever wants someone to feel that way. So we need to know because we don't ever want to make someone feel that way. I'm not talking about that happening in bombshells, but, just across the board or,
Yeah.
whatever else might come up. I've got stuff happening in my personal life and I don't want people to think I'm letting the ball slip. So I'm just not going to tell them about it. But then the ball
Mm.
slips and you're like, what's going on? So having the relationship with people where they feel comfortable telling you uncomfortable things,
Mm.
that is my
Powerful.
goal. If I can make someone feel comfortable to tell me uncomfortable things, I will feel like I've won this year.
Yeah. I think, for people listening and watching, I think that's something for all of us to do this year. I think individually with your personal relationships, like I've had, some really great moments in my personal relationships with people professionally and in more friend and like close relationship settings, um, where I've created enough space for them to happen and for me to hold them. Because again, I know that you're saying like, habits and personality, conscious and system one things that, they're different things, but we do also still need space to address. And so, like you said, you were like, this is a value misalignment. What are my old
Mm-hmm.
values and how can I challenge those? And how can I create enough space for me to feel uncomfortable challenging them in order to change them in to a way that serves me for this phase? And the same thing, I think going back to the pandemic, it's one of the biggest things that I know I learned was how much time I really do have and what I'd like to invest in rather than
Mm-hmm.
spend on. And I think investment is deeper, um, a much deeper process that requires more time and energy. And placing that space into that time and energy is really important.
And a good reframe.
It
What
is.
am I going to invest my time
Yeah.
in? I like that.
As soon as I shifted from spending to investment, I recognized what was worthy of my investment and what I wasn't investing enough into. And acting was a huge example of that. Like you know how it's been for the first 2 weeks of this year for me, but last year it was like my biggest acting year,
Mm-hmm.
financially and opportunity wise. And I wasn't putting I was investing. I was starting to invest subconsciously, but this year has been it's going to be a big investment.
I love that. I really love that. And I think even in terms of the wasted, I don't like saying that, but kind of the wasted minutes in our days. What I'm thinking of is how often is it that you, let's say, are sitting at a restaurant waiting for a friend? And what do you do with that time? Do you just open Instagram and start scrolling? Do
The
you
idle minutes.
the idle minutes that you are not invested in? You're not investing those minutes. You are distracting yourself or whatever. I mean, I try really hard if I'm waiting for someone to put my phone away still. So when they come, my phone's away. I'm already ready for that interaction, and I'll think about other things, or I'll make notes about something I need to do, or, I might use my phone, but I'll invest that time. I'm really, really conscientious of that. But how about, after a crazy day, a lot of people want to turn on the TV and unwind. What are you watching? Are you, just putting something on so you can turn off your brain? Because I understand that. But then be conscientious of doing that. And how often do you do that? Do you do that every day? Because do you actually need to do that every day? Or is that now just how you're spending that time? A habit. Exactly. So that becomes something that is addictive. And I think it's really, really important for us to be really clear on that, because that was another thing that I really took stock of this year, is like those wasted minutes, those in-between minutes where, I was just going to flip something on so I didn't have to think. Thinking is useful.
I think being bored is useful as well.
Being bored is so useful.
And I think that's where, getting back into nature, getting into, really recognizing, I love that you framed it that way, and just ask the question, why am I watching this? Is it, what am I trying to satisfy by watching this? And if you're like, I just need, like, I'm watching Schitt's Creek right now. I'm like so behind the eight ball. I'm just starting it and I love it.
I love Schitt's Creek.
And it's just a chance to kind of watch this really great acting, great script, and switch my brain off for 30 minutes. But I do that because I know that the rest of my time is well invested.
Yeah.
Otherwise, what I'm doing is avoiding. And I think the other big phrase that I would leave us with is, in 2022, what are you running towards and what are you running away from? And it's a very simple test of, am I running towards entertainment or am I running away from pain? Am I running towards this or am I running away from that?
Yeah.
And the exact same scenario can be wildly different for a person depending on that person's circumstances.
I think that's so gold to leave everyone with. And I just want to add on to that. It can be so many things. It doesn't have to be TV. It could be work. It could be like if you're working late until the night and it's not because you have this one deadline that's like comes up once in a quarter. If you realize that these deadlines are consistently coming up and they all seem like fires, burning the house down, and they all seem like something you can't stop and it's constant, that might be something you need to look at, because a lot of times that's what's covering up your intuition. I know we've talked about, finding that intuition. How do you listen to it? You need space. You need space to feel the intuition. If you're filling those voids with shows, work, calls with friends, hangouts, and you never have that empty space, you will never have the space to hear that intuition. So
totally.
Dang, 2021 had so many learnings.
Yeah, it did. Okay, BBs, have a wonderful week. We will see you the next one. Enjoy your daytime, nighttime, middle of the day times, my friends. Thanks for listening, bombshells. In order to continue to elevate, subscribe and don't forget to click that little bell so you can get notified every time we have a new badass brunch. Until next time, stay focused, fierce, and fabulous.